So, like, right now, you're teaching a class called The Meaning of Life. So, in this day and age where the way we act, the way we do things have drastically changed from 20 years ago, from when our parents were alive and, working. How does one question, what is the meaning of life today? And, like, how can we form those questions, or what questions should we ask?
Well, so in that particular regard, as far as meaning of life is concerned, I don't think the word has changed. Is so dramatically different now than it was 25 years ago. So the kind of question. So first of all, a lot of people find this mildly funny, right? If you say, well, it's a class on the meaning of life going on, right? So there's certain movies.
From the outset, it's very interesting. It looks very different.
Thank you for saying that. So I've had a lot of interesting encounters with people around that. I've gotten a lot of incredulous stares, from people. It's to some extent a generational thing, right? There's a Monty Python movie from the 80s called The Meaning of Life, which is kind of a comedian's take on the theme. And if you are into the science fiction classics, there is a book called Hitchhikers to the Galaxy, Douglas Adams from the late 70s, right, where everybody who is familiar with that genre knows that the meaning of life is 42. Why is it 42? Well, because some complicated question was developed that that somehow was getting at what the meaning of life was, and the way it had to be put to the computer, the answer to that was 42. But to make sense of that, now you have to remember nobody remembers what the question was, because it took the computer so long to figure that out, right? So that's so what are we doing if we are not doing that kind of thing? Well, we're asking. Everybody understands that life, if nothing else, is a biological phenomenon, right? So we are a certain kind of organism, a certain kind of biological entity. So there's lots of biological facts about us. And so we are, in a way, part of nature. And as you're asking about the meaning of life, you're asking whether there's any kind of significance to us as biological facts that beyond these biological facts, right? Is there something about us, either in relation to some external entity or something that we can make of our lives, that creates a kind of personal significance? So that's the question of the meaning of life. And religions have a strong record of giving answers to that kind of question that have made sense to a lot of people, right? There was the personal significance, the kind of pointing beyond the biological facts that are constitutive of life. That kind of pointing beyond was done by way of reference to a divine figure. That's an answer that has and continues to work for a lot of people. It does not work for a lot of other people these days who, are not confident that there is such a divinity, or even if there were, that it is the right way connected to us, and so you look elsewhere for what personal significance could be. But these questions by themselves are not changing quite as quickly as these are very fundamental human questions that are kind of lingering with us more enduringly than the state of technology. I mean, that changes a lot faster.
So, you did say, like, relatively, like, we are biological beings, but to someone that, wants to find a larger meaning of life, biological beings and just being, dust of carbon atoms is not very, like, inspiring, or, it doesn't. So what I'm trying to say is, like, how can someone just frame themselves as just biological beings? Don't you think that we need a higher, dare I say it, like a purpose or some sort of motivation or incentive to go about our days and explore new ideas and do new things?
Yeah. So the motivation for this question about the meaning of life was just to say, what we are as human beings, just as part of nature, is we are a certain kind of organism. We are, there are certain biological facts about us. We have a body and we have a brain and all that, right? And so And you know, you're right. I mean, then this brain generates certain questions, right? And we want to know, you know, are we just part of nature the way a palm tree is, or a bit of grass is, or maybe something totally unorganic is, right? Or is there something beyond us? Is there something beyond that gives us, you know, could be a purpose, or, you know, something. So the question about significance is always so some kind of relation to something outside of us, yeah, so that we find relevance in that.
Yeah. So do you think that most people that study this topic often come down to that conclusion that human beings need that some sort of connection to that higher purpose, or
so
something outside of themselves?
So religion has a strong record of answering that question, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, this is why religion has been attractive to people. So religion provides. So one way of motivating what religion does is, so if you are a finite biological creature, it's something where, you know, it's a finite lifetime and a finite size to your body. You kind of wonder, what am I? Is there personal significance that I have because I'm connecting to things around me, and then you can say, you know, you are connecting to things around you because you matter to people around you, can make contributions to their lives, that you can help with this and, you know, help with that. But then you kind of ask, but what is their significance, right? So for finite things, you can always keep asking such questions. And what's different about religion is religion has this ability to talk about the infinity of God. You know? So you as a finite being can relate to this other kind of entity that is infinite, and you can kind of lean against that other entity. And about that other entity, because it's infinite, this kind of question doesn't arise any further, right? As it would arise for other finite things. Yeah? And so that's one way of thinking about how religion has created this purpose, right? This external purpose, that there's this infinite entity that you're connected to. But, you know, of course, that depends on the viability of that answer, is that you find yourself persuaded of the evidence given for the religious framework, right? And a lot of people are not persuaded of that, and there's one whole line of thinking known as existentialism that goes a completely different way there, right? And says there is, as you're asking about personal significance, don't count on anything that's externally given, right? Certainly not, you know, any kind of divinity. It's just not enough grounding, not enough reason to think that we have that we can count on that. So existentialists, and these would be people like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre is probably the best known one, French thinkers. So Sartre had famously had the slogan, the existence precedes the essence. Yeah? So we are kind of a naked existence. So initially we really just are this biological thing, you know, biological organism, and in our case as human beings, you know, we are a particular kind of biological thing, namely with a very sophisticated brain. So existence precedes the essence. So what we can basically do is we can invent our own relevance, right? We make choices, and thereby we define ourselves as a certain kind of being. And existentialism proposes to us something that by traditional religious standards would seem completely outrageous and ridiculous and undefensible and sacrilegious, namely to consider life a completely open story, a tabula rasa, where you really are telling your own narrative by making your own choices and thereby putting yourself somewhere in the world and developing that significance by yourself.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think that shifted? Well, I don't even know if it shifted between, you know, everyone, not everyone, but most people believing in religion, and now many people, I think I saw the stats in a lot of developed countries, the, you know, increasing number of people not believing, or, you know, traditional religions has drastically increased. What do you think is the maybe reason to that, or is there even logical reason?
Well, so one person one tends to read in a class called The Meaning of Life, or, you know, anything concerned also with existentialism and its predecessors, is Friedrich Nietzsche, 19th century German philosopher. died in 1900, in fact. And so Nietzsche is famous for for among other things, the formulation of the death of God. So the death of God, and what's so intriguing about that formulation, which by the way is not entirely original with Nietzsche, but was kind of circling around in the 19th century. But what's intriguing about the formulation, the death of God, is that you are not thereby simply saying that God does not exist. You are saying there was a death, right? God died, and that means God was once alive, right? So, and then you wonder, what could that mean? I mean, if God was ever alive, the kind of being that he or she or they were presumably could not die, right? So what would this even mean, that God died? And the interpretation of that phrase is, well, what's been happening is humanity went through different stages of thinking, scientific development and also reflection about who we are in the world, and for a certain period of time, thinking about a divinity, a god or gods, was the best explanation that we had, right? And then science made more progress, thinking made more progress, and eventually a lot of things could be explained without God that traditionally had required a kind of religious reference, right? And so that's one. So the death of God theme, that basically the belief in God has become somewhat superfluous, unnecessary. I think that that drives a lot of the loss of religiosity in the world.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting how these philosophical discussions have led to different path in one's own life and one's own perspective.